Here's Brody Brazil.
So the realization I'm about to share with you, I promise there's no pride in coming up with it or making a video about it, but I feel like it's so accurate and so relevant that it needs to be documented and it needs to be discussed. What am I talking about here? Well, it's become obvious lately that this NHL season is not going as planned. Now, that's fair to say about a lot of things in life, that January of 2022 is not going as planned. But as it relates to hockey and the topic of this video, going back to last summer when the schedule came out and there was 82 games for every team and there was the Olympic break that players were going to get to participate in that. And you thought that there would be no interruptions, full steam ahead for everybody, a lot more of a normal NHL scenario. Everybody was excited by that. In the first couple weeks of this regular season, there were some shakeups, and obviously the most recent few weeks, it has really taken some turns for the worse. To the extent now that we have 103 No, wait a second. Let me update that, because actually when I was prepping this video, another game for tomorrow night with the Philadelphia Flyers got postponed tonight. So we're now up to 104 games for the NHL to go ahead and make up eventually. Now they can do this. It's possible. It's not going to be easy. I'll explain that in just a second. But the scope of these games, it goes all the way back to November 16th, right? And there are also games in the future all the way till January 22nd. After that, we're not even there yet. But that just goes to show you the span of how long games have been being postponed for and how many total the league has to make up. Not to mention, this is asymmetrical. It's not like every team has 3 or 6. Some teams have like 7 or 8, and some teams have a minimal amount. So that only makes it a lot more difficult. So how can the league make these games up? Well, they're not going to have the Olympic break per se that was built into their schedule. Players will not be going to China to play in the Winter Games. So those 3 weeks could be made up like this. If hypothetically the NHL had 8 games per night, so that's half your teams, right? 8 games, 16 of the 32 teams playing on every other given night. That means that, and that's a pretty aggressive schedule to be playing every other night with no set days or nights off in between. That means that to make up those 104 games, you would need to use 14 of those 21 nights. Now, again, all of this is optimal if the schedule were symmetrical and every team had the same amount of games to make up. Again, unfortunately, some teams have a lot more than others, but that's 2/3 of 3 weeks with an aggressive schedule that you're already chewing through. And my last point here, we're still not even done with changes and more postponed games. It does seem like every new day brings another postponement. So we're already 66% done with free time, and we're using it pretty aggressively to begin with. What do fans say about this? I posted this earlier today on Twitter when it was only 103. 8% said, hey, no big deal. They know about those 3 weeks. But the other 92%, including 50% saying, uh-oh, the other 92% are at least interested, if not a bit worried about this situation and scenario. But besides postponed games, right? I mean, even if they make all these up and every team gets to 82, or even if they cut it down to 75, I don't know. But the real issue here is so many critical players on so many teams who have missed so much time. This is a league where it's all about parity. It's all about the finest details. It's all about, one small mistake could cost you an entire game. Well, what about if one team is missing 4 of their top players for a full week, and another team is at full steam, and a different team is only missing 1 player, but another team is missing 6 players and their head coach, or in the case of the Sharks, 7 and their head coach, and they didn't pause any games. So it's not necessarily about postponing games. It's about the players you miss during the games you actually play. And even deeper than that, players who have come back from COVID protocol, I mean, they've missed a week of team or 2 of team activities, not to mention skating and conditioning. So what type of shape are they in? It's more than just the week, approximately, that they missed. It's now trying to compensate over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and they're not the same. So the big question here, how legitimate will this NHL season be considered? And I should have put there, I should have extended it to, how will it be considered next to other normal seasons? Because going back to my very first statement, this is no longer a normal NHL season. And if you think about it, it's not just this one. 2019 into early 2020, that season was stopped for most teams around the 70-game mark. And then the league went dormant, as they should and needed to, for several months. And then they resumed play in the summer, completely bubbled up in Edmonton and Toronto. So you can't say anything about that season was normal. 2020, I guess really into 21, there was no 20 part of the 21 season. It was all in 2021. It started mid-January. Every team played 56 games. They only played division opponents. And the whole back-to-back thing, there was nothing normal about that. And now, here into 2022, the first season we were expecting back as normal, let's just declare it right now. We wanted a normal season. We were set up for one. We hoped for one, but it has not turned out that way. So how can you judge this season compared to 2017, 2014, 2002? You just can't do it. This is not a normal season, and it should not be judged accordingly, even if they do get to 82 games. I'm going to say all that, but I hope you take away these important points with that. We're talking about the legitimacy and the relevance of this season. But there are two things that are very evident to me as I watch and as I communicate on a firsthand basis with those who are actually in the mix. Winning is still as difficult as it ever was. And I just told you that some teams are minus star players and minus half their team, minus their head coach. Yes, but it's amazing. The pipeline and the AHL and players that get brought up, they're still that good. Winning is still difficult. No team is a pushover even when they're that shorthanded. And a lot of people in this league would also tell you that winning is even harder right now with the variables at hand. So we're not here to say, should this season count the same? That's ridiculous. You've seen the playoffs of the last couple of years. You know that winning the Stanley Cup means just as much. In fact, it may mean more because of these things. Winning is still hard, and winning's even harder because of the variables and the roster hot potato and musical chairs that are going on. So my point here is not to make any less of the season at hand, but it's only to say it's not a normal one, and we shouldn't treat it that way.